Clemson Tigers. Dabo Swinney hires Tom Allen as defensive coordinator. Obviously, everybody probably already knows by now, but most recently, he was the defensive coordinator for the Penn State Nittany Lions, who made a relatively deep playoff run and fell short. Dabo reaches out to Tom Allen, and he accepts the job as defensive coordinator at Clemson. Previous to his 1 year at Penn State, he was obviously the coach at Indiana for 7 seasons, and he's got a long 30-plus year career going back to University of South Florida, and a lot of defensive coordinator stops for him along the way. He also coaches linebackers, so that fits right in with the void that Clemson currently has by letting Wes Goodwin go. Jordan, just initial thoughts when you heard the news kind of breaking earlier today, where it was confirmed by multiple Clemson media outlets that Tom Allen was officially, unofficially hired on as Clemson's defensive coordinator. Obviously, Board of Trustees have to meet tomorrow to confirm the contract and do the formalities and all that stuff. But as far as everything's concerned, Tom Allen is Clemson's new defensive coordinator. Your initial reaction when you heard the news?
Yeah, I mean, when we were talking about, how this search was going to play out, it was very evident, based on everything, all the indications that we had gotten from Clemson media, from those that are close to the situation, that Dabo was going to take a swing on this hire. It was going to be similar to, when he made the Garrett Riley hire 2 years ago, a guy that, has a real big name, who was successful at his previous stop, a person that has experience. I think Tom Allen was a guy that we had mentioned, in our short list, and a lot of we weren't far from the only ones. Tom Allen was a guy that was on a lot of people's list because it made a lot of sense.
Right.
He successful defensive coordinator, experienced, defensive coordinator and coach, former head coach, who was, very, very good. And also, we'll talk about it, but he's also very much a culture fit in terms of his personality, his values. He aligns with Dabo Swinney a lot in that aspect. So he was a name that was on, at or near the top of a lot of people's boards. They were throwing out, Jim Leonard, the NFL route, like Jim Leonard, and then, Al Golden at Notre Dame.
Right.
But Tom Allen was very much at the top of everybody's list. And Dabo felt like this was the guy. This was his first choice. And so, when the news dropped, I wasn't shocked by any means. I knew Clemson would have the cachet to be able to pull a guy that they really, really wanted, if it came down to it. And I think this situation worked out perfectly. With the extenuating circumstances, or with Tom Allen, personally wanting to be closer to family. I think it made a lot of sense, and I'm really excited. I mean, this is a guy that another former head coach joining your staff. I mean, we've talked about, over the past few years, how the lack of experience on this staff has really been a detriment to being able to get the most out of what has been a really talented roster. And obviously this past season, there were a lot of shortcomings on the defensive side of the ball because of some inexperience. But now you have a guy that's been there, done that, and can also add his own perspective and voice as a former head coach, along with, a guy like Matt Luke on the offensive side of the ball. This staff looks a lot different, with this hire than it did, 2-3 years ago. And I think that's it didn't happen as quickly as we wanted it, but I think at this point, you still have a couple of guys with some inexperience, but on the whole, this is a staff full of, really experienced, high-level recruiters and coaches, and that's what you need to have when you have a roster that is as talented as Clemson's. I think people forget that, and it was funny seeing some detractors, talk about, why would Tom Allen go to Clemson? And like, Clemson is as, or if not more talented than Penn State, defensively.
Right.
I don't, especially when you look at, the recruiting talent and the level of player, it's very comparable.
Mhm.
And so I just, it made a lot of sense. And, Tom Allen wanted to be closer to home. He has more ties to the Southeast than he does up in the Northwest, Northeast, I mean. And, I think it worked out for Clemson. I think this is a really good hire.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Jordan. I think you mentioned a lot of things there quickly that went into this process of hiring Tom Allen and really Tom Allen wanting to come to Clemson and be their DC. I know there's a lot of talk out there about it's a lateral move. Why would he want to come to Clemson? And you touched on a lot of those things. First and foremost, from a family aspect, he's got two daughters, grown daughters. That live in the Carolinas. So being closer to them, I'm sure is definitely a big pro for him coming down to Clemson. You mentioned the culture fit that he is. He's obviously a culture fit. He's a guy of faith. He's a guy that speaks openly about that, and obviously is going to fit in nicely at Clemson and with Dabo Swinney, who kind of creates and basically pushes that culture at Clemson. He makes it no secret that he's a guy of faith. So there's that there. But also, you talk about the talent gap. I don't really see there being a talent gap. People talk about it being a downgrade. And we've talked about it on this show a lot in the past. The slipping of Clemson's program as a whole was 100%, in my opinion, attributed to coaching. Yes, there was some guys that we missed on. Yes, there was some talent evaluation that obviously didn't manifest on the field. Talk about DJ Uiagalelei. You talk about several guys in that wide receiver room that ended up transferring out and didn't produce at their next school either. So obviously we missed on some guys, but at the end of the day, it falls back on coaching. They evaluated those guys. They brought those guys in. Those guys didn't work out. And I think there was a point in time where Dabo kind of took a chance on too many inexperienced guys on his coaching staff. And you can see him really rectifying that and making a complete 180 move when it comes to the Clemson coach staff. Now, on both sides of the ball, you have former Power 5 head coaches that are very seasoned on your staff. One's your DC, one is your offensive line coach, right? And I think, to your point, that shifts the culture inside of that coaching locker room, right? With all of that experience, because I mean, those two guys especially know what it means to run a big time college football program and the challenges that it presents. And sometimes I think that makes you a better assistant coach when you have seen that side of the coin, if you will, in college football. So I think this hire makes a ton of sense from a lot of different perspectives. Couldn't be more excited to have Tom Allen. I know there's some Penn State fans out there that are probably disappointed, even though they may not be saying that online. They may be acting like they're happy that he's gone. But the reality of it is that Tom Allen was going to be the DC at Penn State next year in 2025 if Clemson didn't come calling. So Dabo Swinney goes out, the Clemson brand goes out, that Paul brand goes out, and pulls a big-time defensive coordinator from a playoff team. Yet again, just like eerily similar to what Dabo Swinney did, the last coordinator hire that he did in Garrett Riley when he plucked him from TCU when they had just played for a national title. So I think Clemson fans should be excited about this, and I can't wait to see what he does with the defense.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk about what, Tom Allen in his one season as Penn State's defensive coordinator was largely successful, the top 10 statistically in basically every category. They were 7th nationally in total defense and 294.7 yards per game. They were 8th in scoring defense, 16.5 points per game. And most importantly, they were 9th in the country in rushing defense, allowing just 101.8 rushing yards per game. And that's with obviously playing, tougher teams late in the year in the playoff games.
Right.
So, I mean, that tells you a lot. I mean, honestly, I mean, yeah, that Penn State defense was uber talented, but so is Clemson's. If he can, I mean, so you the goal for Clemson was getting a guy that was able to get, that kind of caliber of play out of really talented football players. And you just weren't getting that, from Wes Goodwin. And more importantly, one thing that I saw, multiple times throughout the day is, and I had been familiar with Tom Allen in at his previous stops, but seeing some of the player interviews from his time at both Indiana and Penn State, he is a player's coach. I think his players are absolutely going to want to run through a wall for him, and I think that ultimately is one of the biggest things that was going to separate him from what Wes Goodwin was. Because while I think the players respected Wes, I don't think it was a thing where like they didn't like him or they didn't care for him. Wes Goodwin was very well liked by his players, but I don't think he truly wasn't able to get the most out of them. I don't think they. It's kind of hard to. It's kind of hard to say like they didn't want to play for him, but it was just he wasn't able to bring that next level out of some of those guys. He didn't have it in him. He's not that kind of coach. Very cerebral, very analytical coach, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to get in your face and tell you what you're not doing right and bring that fire out of you. And that's where I think the Clemson defense has been missing is that edge.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned how cerebral Wes Goodwin is and how much of a defensive mind he has, X's and O's wise. And, I think he's great with the analytics and the game plan side of the game and stuff like that. But when it came to on the field in-game coaching, I think that's where Wes Goodwin kind of left a lot to be desired. And no shots at Wes Goodwin. I think he did his absolute best while he was here at Clemson. I wish him the best for the rest of his career. And he may eventually turn into a really great defensive coordinator. He's just not there yet. And to your point with the players, I don't think he really commanded the level of intensity that is expected from a defense at Clemson. That's kind of been Clemson's calling card for a very long time, all the way back to when Brent Venables was brought on as defensive coordinator. And I'm not saying Tom Allen's going to be the next Brent Venables because that may be an unattainable level, right? But he does play a similar style of aggressive defense that really gets after the quarterback, that likes to bring a lot of pressure. He really does a lot of good stuff with his front seven. And he's got a long track record of being an experienced play caller at the Power 5 level. And I think that was the point with this hire with Dabo Swinney. He really wanted a guy that had a ton of experience because guess what? When Tom Allen finally gets to Clemson and gets to meet with all these players and gets into the meeting rooms, he's not going to be lacking talent. Talent is not Clemson's problem. Coaching has been Clemson's problem for a few years now. Dabo Swinney is rectifying that. He's obviously pivoted, and I think it's a home run hire. Talk about a little bit about Tom Allen. You mentioned some of his stats at his 1 year at Penn State, but just his schematically, how do you think he fits in with what Clemson fans are used to seeing from a Clemson Tiger defense, and what you think he's going to be able to do with the talent that he's going to have moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like you mentioned, I mean, schematically, he's going to be very similar in terms of philosophy to say, well, really what Clemson has been used to under Wes Goodwin and Brent Venables. I mean, aggressive. They're going to play a lot of man coverage. They're going to get, they're going to try to get tackles for loss. And more importantly, I think most importantly is more similar to what Brent Venables was. Tom Allen is a guy that's going to want to stop the run at all costs. Like this is not just a Penn State thing. Or when he took over as defensive coordinator from Indiana, he took over. He took over one of the worst Power 4 defense or Power 5 then defenses in all of college football, and they jumped from the 100th nationally in rushing defense to top 50 in one season. He's a guy that absolutely is going to emphasize stopping the run, which is what Brent Venables was.
Right.
And I think that's what has been most needed from this program, especially as of late. I mean, you just with the talent you have up front defensively, you should not be you should not be giving up nearly 300 rushing yards in a playoff game to anybody. You shouldn't be giving up 300 rushing yards to the Citadel. It's that is where you're going to see the biggest change in philosophy is the emphasis on stopping the run. And the great Clemson defenses that we've seen over the last decade were adept at stopping the run. Yeah, does that mean you're going to give up some explosive plays sometimes? Sure, in the passing game, but that was always a part of the scheme. Like Brent Venables had, they had years where they, gave up some explosive passing plays, but because you've recruited so well, especially at corner, like that's always been how you've gone about doing things. Like you're gonna get put on islands, but because you have some really good, talented, rangy bump and run corners, like I think it's a perfect fit because you already have the talent up front on the defensive line, and I'm really interested to see kind of how he evaluates the linebacker position. That's a group that you and I have some questions about as far as depth is concerned. Of course, you have Wade Woodaz and Sammy Brown coming back, but beyond that, you don't have really any proven guys. Kobe McLeod tore his ACL early this season. You didn't really get to see a lot out of him. And beyond, and certainly after him, you don't really have much of anything as far as proven production or guys that are ready to play right now. So I'm interested to see like when he comes in, like how he evaluates that room and whether or not he feels like he wants to go, potentially get somebody. I don't know. Of course, you also have incoming transfer Jeremiah Alexander, so that could change the calculus as well. But I ultimately overall, I think Tom Allen brings that level of intensity and philosophy defensively that this Clemson defense was built to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and he's certainly a fiery guy, and it's going to be key, I think, for what he does in that linebacker room. I think that's one of the rooms you mentioned with one of the a question mark heading into spring practice. With the previous injuries and just the lack of experienced depth behind the front two guys, and one of those front two guys was a true freshman this past year in Sammy Brown. I mean, he got quite a bit of play as a freshman, but at the end of the day, he's still got a lot of developing to do. He's a young guy, so that's a position group that unfortunately we've had a lot of big time talent at over the past couple seasons, and we've seen them kind of regress every single season. And that's unfortunate, especially when you got a guy like Wade Woodaz and Barrett Carter and Jeremiah Trotter, and those dudes really didn't get any better. They regressed every single season since Wes Goodwin took over as linebackers coach. So it's going to be good to get some fresh set of eyes in that room. It's going to be good to see how he meshes with the rest of that defensive staff. We got a lot of good coaches, I think, along that defensive staff. And I think it's going to be pivotal for those guys to mesh early, get on the same page, on the same philosophy when it comes to how they're going to run the defense. And I think because he is somewhat similar with his philosophy as kind of a Brent Venables was, I think it'll be a little bit of an easier transition because of that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's going to mesh perfectly, just with the culture and just what Clemson is about. And I think that's ultimately kind of why you want to see this. You really want to see like him get in and really, just kind of cement, I guess, his foothold into this Clemson defense and kind of make his mark, because he's going to have a spring to really, I think this is going to be a spring of evaluation, as it always is. But I think more so when you have a coordinator change, like, all bets are off the table as far as, just kind of, he comes in and takes a look at the defense as a whole, all position groups, and kind of how he wants to construct his defense for this 2025 season. And, he's not going to come in with any prior, biases or anything like that in terms of like who's going to start, who's going to sit. So, I mean, I really do think it's a fresh start for everybody. I mean, you're going to have the key players are the key players and are
Right.
probably
Yeah.
more than likely going to play. But you get what I'm saying. Like it's a fresh start, and who kind of takes to this new defense quickly will kind of determine the positions where the depth chart doesn't seem to be as solidified.
Yeah, and the good thing is there's a lot of experienced talent coming back on this Clemson defense, right? 8+ starters coming back on the defensive side of the ball. That's going to be key in this defense taking a step up next season, and I absolutely expect the defense to take a huge step forward from where they performed this past season under the call of Tom Allen. So I think he's not gonna have a shortage of talent to work with. It's going to be up to him to put the players in the correct positions in order to maximize the guys that we currently have on the roster. And to your point, they may end up, going to the portal after spring and picking up a guy here or a guy there, depending on his evaluation of the current roster at Clemson. But again, there's plenty of talent there. So I don't expect there will be any problems when it comes to guys to fill positions. But with that said, talking about Tom Allen and his family and the culture fit, you talked about this being Dabo's number one guy. What do you think about Tom Allen drew Dabo to bring him into Clemson, and then vice versa, and kind of how is he going to mesh with the culture that is Clemson right now? And I think it's interesting that Clemson, Dabo Swinney, has now pulled two previous tenured head coaches from the Power Five into his staff to be assistant coaches. One's a DC, one's obviously an O-line coach, but just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it says a lot. I mean, still about what Dabo is as a head coach and in the head coaching space. I mean, Clemson and Clemson as well. Clemson is a destination for coordinators. Like I think even with the slip from perennial national championship contenders to regular ACC championship contenders, fringe playoff team, like that level of regression. Clemson is still a destination for coordinators. And one thing that people just that aren't familiar with the program, they don't realize that within the industry, that is very much the sentiment because of how Dabo goes about running his program. He's very much a work-life balance, family, all of that, and he's a very hands-off head coach. I mean, despite what some of our fans like to think, Dabo's meddling and everything. Dabo is very much a hands-off coach. Like he lets his coordinators and his position coaches largely handle their business, and he steps in when he sees that things are just clearly not up to standard. But
right.
He's very compared to some other coaches, like Nick Saban was a notoriously very difficult head coach to work for. I mean, he was obviously he was the greatest of all time. So
right.
His methods worked, but it meant that he didn't get to keep coordinators very long and assistants very long because it's a grind and it takes a lot out of you. Kirby Smart is very much the same way because he learned that coaching style from Saban. There's a lot of these head coaches that are very, very the way they run their program. It's very, very strenuous on their staffs, and Dabo is not like that. Comparatively. And that's what attracts a lot of assistants because they know that they're going to come in and they're going to be allowed to coach and do their job. It creates an environment where guys just don't want to leave. And, I think that's what attracted Tom Allen along with the other things we mentioned. And I think that's ultimately what's going to make it such a good fit for Clemson.
Yeah. I mean, I think the more you look into it and the more that you learn about Tom Allen and who he is as a person, you see the seamless transition that's going to be coming in and being the coordinator at a program like Clemson. Makes a lot of sense from all standpoints. He runs a similar defense that Dabo once run at Clemson. Obviously, I mentioned his grown daughters that live in the Carolinas. Obviously, he's going to be close to them. They probably have kids, so his grandkids. It seems like and you can speak to this a little bit, but his son currently on staff at Penn State as a defensive analyst, probably going to take the trip with him down to Clemson, South Carolina, and become an analyst on the Clemson staff as well. So when you look at all of it as a whole, it's kind of a no-brainer for Tom Allen and a no-brainer for Clemson, really. And I think, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I think it's a home run hire. Now, is it guaranteed going to be, amazing and work out 100%? And, he's going to be the next long-term DC at Clemson? I don't know. But I think from the list that we talked about, he's one of the top names that you would have wanted off of that list. Not only because of his defensive prowess, but his experience, 30-plus years in coaching, started way down in high school, worked his way all the way up to the college level, spent 7 years as a head coach at Indiana. I mean, I think you checked all the boxes with this hire. So I feel really good. I think Clemson fans should be excited about what's to come with Tom Allen. And again, like I said before, can't wait to see what he does with this defense. Spring is going to be a lot of fun to follow and watch, because just like a couple seasons ago on the offensive side of the ball, when Garrett Riley came in and, you were excited about change and what are they doing and what looks different. It's going to be similar this year when we're going through spring and talking about it on the defensive side of the ball. So, shout out Dabo Swinney. Shout out Tom Allen. Welcome to Tiger Town. And we can't wait to see how your career progresses here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really think that this is we mentioned this in one of our previous in our previous show. Like the magnitude of this hire was you couldn't really understate it with the amount of talent that you're bringing back on both sides of the ball, but just with defensively with how much talent that you felt like you didn't get the most out of last season that you're going to be bringing back this year. It was very, very important that you nailed this hire, because offensively, we've hinted our thoughts on what this team could potentially be offensively next year.
Yeah.
And to not be able to couple that with a stout defense, a playoff caliber defense would be it would be a shame. I mean, really, especially with the strides you made, this past season and how really it was that the offense that gave you the best chance in your games rather than the defense. Like we're not used to saying that. And I really think next season could be truly a special year if you nailed this hire. And I think Dabo, I think he understood the magnitude of it, and that's why he wanted to make a big swing. And so we'll see. Nothing is guaranteed in coaching and in college football. So, when we say all these things about Tom Allen, that doesn't mean that he's guaranteed to be the guy and it's going to work out. But this was the type of hire that you needed to make.
Absolutely.
Just because of everything that I just mentioned. So it's really, really exciting, man. And Dabo, again, shows that, hey, I'm still one of the top coaches in the sport. People still want to play for me. People still want to coach for me.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's always going to keep Clemson in the conversation, even despite what some detractors might say.